join conversations with unique minds on the threats, the complexity, and the geopolitics shaping our world. This is the Entropy Podcast with Francis Gorman.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Entropy Podcast. I'm your host Francis Gorman. Before we dive in, if today's conversation challenges you, sparks a new idea, or sharpens how you think about the world, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who enjoys staying curious. Today I'm joined by Dinesh Nagarajan, a global partner with IBM's Consulting Cybersecurity Services, who has over 25 years of cybersecurity consulting and transformation experience. Dinesh regularly advises C-suites in the domains of data security, secure and AI, DevSecOps, quantum safe security service, cryptographic strategy, and enterprise AI security transformation. Dinesh supports clients across all aspects of cyber, from advisory assignments to scale delivery for both change and operational security. In his current role, Dinesh is the global lead for data and AI security, along with quantum safe security at IBM. Dinesh, it's lovely to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Francis. Thanks for having me on this podcast. Thank you.
Very, very welcome, Dinesh. And I think there's a lot of conversations that I want to start with you today and try and work them out and see where we get to, especially from kind of a practitioner lens, from kind of boots on the ground with clients in this space. I'm normally talking to people that are looking outward, but you're looking inward at organizations at the moment. And that's a lens I want to capture. And before we kind of get into the weeds of quantum and everything, we're seeing a convergence of three transformations simultaneously at the moment. We've got AI, we've got cryptographic modernization, and then we've got quantum readiness all coming together. Which of those do you believe history will view as the most consequential security transformation in your view, based on what's unfolding in front of us right now?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's a great way to start. I think in a larger scheme of things, AI transformation will be the most consequential, at least from my viewpoint. Fundamentally, one of the things that we've seen, the intersection of where cryptography modernization, post-quantum cryptography, and AI security coming into play is the AI security, or securing AI itself, relies on trust, and the trust infrastructure or capabilities rely on cryptography. So no surprises there, right? So given the scale and the proliferation expected of AI, not just in cybersecurity, across every sphere of enterprise business today, right from employees using it on a day-to-day basis to it doing automation and workflows and so on across many different fields, it's the scale of the challenge is only going to significantly increase. So if folks get the security on AI right, when they start looking at, establishing a trust infrastructure where they can validate, verify AI and agents and applications that rely on AI, then, essentially that's essentially will be the most consequential, because that's going to drive automatically the logical demand to make sure cryptography is modernized, make sure cryptography can scale to the level that AI is expected to scale. Pretty much every employee is going to use it. And across the enterprise, there's going to be a massive use and consumption of AI. So in order to meet all those demands, you need a trusted control capability and cryptography. And then, of course, if you're building so much on cryptography, make sure that you do the right thing, take into consideration the impact of quantum computing to your cryptography estate, and therefore do the right thing. So I think they're kind of fit in very nicely. It's fair to say it's not always looked at that way by most of our clients. Probably some of them are still grappling with the challenge of looking at each one of them separately. But I think over a period of time, it will converge very quickly, and people realize that you could have you could achieve all of those three key milestones, or aspirationally, when you drive them in a good practice way.
Pretty interesting that you've talked about the kind of clients see them almost as three separate things at the moment, because that's my observation from dealing with people on the outside, but also from the conversations I've had on the show, is that you have in most enterprises an AI center of excellence that is very much focused on delivering AI functionality. You may have a cryptographic team in the middle that's very much focused on ensuring the HSMs and the crypto are, governed or not governed in some cases as you get into discovery. And then you have normally pockets in the organization looking at post quantum readiness. And what's very obvious to me is if all three of those things sat within a singular hood, like the AI Center of Excellence, and you built in your quantum readiness, I have a feeling what's going to happen is, and you can tell me if this is a good feeling that you can stand over, or if it's only a hypothesis that I'm creating. Is I have a feeling a lot of AI programs are going to meet the post quantum readiness programs, and there's going to be a fight to untangle what was done to build in that cryptographic resilience. I'd like to get your view from being on the ground in terms of if that is Francis talking doo doo or actually something that is a reality.
Yeah, well, look, it maybe at this point in the time, it might be a hypothesis, but given the direction, what we're seeing, how each one of those activities are going in a separate direction, it might be a challenge. It might be a prioritization challenge. It might be resource allocation challenge, and I think it'll also be where the business criticality is. Ultimately, that's what would win. If you look at AI, let's look at AI in itself. It was one of the most unique IT transformation activities, or IT wave, if you like. I can't remember the last one as being that unique, which has a visibility right from the top to bottom. It's a very unique thing. It's not necessarily that you've had that. We had the cloud wave a few years back, and a lot of other waves, but that didn't capture the imagination from a CXO level all the way to an engineer, what AI has done. So it has that visibility, it has got that advantage, but the change, the inflection point, these two inflection points will have a conversion, will have an intersection point, and that's where I think the benefit of being part of the AI is you would already have a lot of funding, a lot of allocation, prioritization allocated. So you have a better success, in theory at least, to get some of these security objectives done, including PQC. But within the PQC program, there will be some innovation. But also, I think we need to keep in mind there is a lot of cryptography outside AI that also needs to be migrated to PQC. AI might take you to a certain extent, might be a lot of it is the AI infrastructure stack predominantly, and some other stack that it might be working with. But there's quite a lot of infrastructure applications, data, third-party supply chain, cloud, hyperscalers that do use cryptography, which they may not have any AI in it. So I think PQC will continue to run, but AI could accelerate it, some parts of it, and they might get benefit of it. But I think we'll have to see how this plays out. But I think we already see AI is taken up a lot of mind space and mind share among clients. Fair enough, and rightly so. There is a lot of aspirational elements within there, but I think it also needs to calm down a bit, in the sense allow other business priorities and BAU activities to take into consideration.
That's great, Dinesh. I suppose my comment is don't have AI in those components yet, because I think if I look at the vendor space and what's happening in the world, everything seems to have a level of AI being built into it at some point or other. In the last week or so, we saw Anthropic first release Fable to the market, and the US government take it away, which was a very sad as feeling I got on Saturday morning when I woke up to finish building the next $1 billion company and realized I'd lost Fable from my command line. Will this drive the conversation for sovereign AI within the European Union? Is this going to create a fundamental watershed moment for enterprises to go, hold on a minute, we've built our entire stack on the assumption of availability of X, Y, or Z, and that can be turned off with the swipe of a pen instantly for everyone?
I think it might. It definitely would, at least it's going to wake up some of the enterprises to relook at their strategy and say, okay, what if this happens tomorrow? What if we're relying on a particular company that is from a particular geography? And if there is some political decision that's driving that, then that'll have an impact. So sovereignty is a big topic. I think it started in data, now it's infrastructure, now it's gone with AI. It would definitely look at it. But also, I think you need to look at it. There's an interesting, I was part of some panel discussions with, which is largely European. It was just probably, I think it was a Mobile World Congress, where we heard a senior leader in a European bank say that the way the European regulations are looking at it, it's almost anti-innovation. So maybe you could still innovate in a certain way, and experiment and create all those great ideas and elements in a broader sense. And then when you really go down a production and implement them or infuse those innovation into your business workflows, then a lot of these strategic decisions need to be considered. It's a challenge because there's a lot of choices available. You're also going to make make a decision on, okay, which platform should I use? I get the benefit of this platform, but of course, am I going to get the same level of sophistication, if you like, in other platforms? So, and therefore, I'm also going to be less competitive in my business because I'm not being able to do what my peers are able to do, and so on. So, 100% agree with you. The sovereignty point will be a key point, but how much of that trickles down into really core decision making is something to be seen.
Yeah, I think it's something I'm going to watch with intent over the next couple of months and see how that really materializes. I think the question I have is, how does Europe respond? How will we? Because we are at a competitive disadvantage. Like if I think about it from my own instance, I can have Claude on my phone. I can start off a build conceptually on my laptop. I can pick it up when I'm getting back out of the car to make the next iteration. I can hook it to a GitHub or Versal, and I can be publishing in real time. And one thing that really struck home to me with Fable specifically, because it was so consistently good at output, even though I only had it for a couple of days, I might add, was the feedback loop. So we have a conversation now, and we're building an app, and you say to me, Francis, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could do X, Y, or Z? And by the end of that conversation, that was live and incredibly good in terms of functionality. Be it needs to be validated and tested and all, but from ideation through to validation, the loop was incredibly quick. So, from a security perspective, Dinesh, when you can have a phone call with someone and have a product at the end of the phone call, how do you keep on top of that from a security architecture perspective, or from a security testing or a validation perspective? How do you look at this problem now as part of your consulting wing and go, we're kind of losing autonomy over some of the decisions here because they're happening in real time? How do you get into that loop?
Yeah, look, I think for us, it's a bit different in the consulting space, that we have a lot more flexibility in a certain terms of being able to leverage the different capabilities, the platforms that are available. But from a client, I completely agree. If you're an organization who don't have access to it, then it can potentially be a competitive disadvantage. There's a lot of things that could help you in it. I think the key thing is to understand, what kind of let's say what kind of innovation or what kind of change or transformation that you're looking to drive, how you're looking to transform, and that will drive that. I'll give you one example. I think it'll be best to talk through as examples. There's a fairly large big bank, global bank. They're based everywhere, basically. One of the things they're trying to do is they're trying to roll out Claude Code to their entire developer community. So their vision, if you like, is in the next couple of years, in their own words, if you like, we would like to transform our software development entirely driven by AI up to a certain percentage in the next couple of years. So there's a very ambitious sort of goal. Now, some of these will get interrupted and challenged, or when you have these kind of changes that happen, because that goal is expected to drive a certain amount of outcome, not just in productivity gains, but also fundamentally freeing up time of their senior developers from being engaged on regular BAU, software development, application development, operations work, to doing something completely different, which they never had that opportunity or time to be able to do it. So that kind of disrupts that whole planning completely. But they got to think about, is there something else that they can use? Is this, first of all, is this access a permanent thing, or is it a very temporary thing? I think there are some of those things that need to be done. But also fundamentally, one of the things I've seen in the security context is geopolitics does play a role today. With all the changes that's happened, with all the impact that we've seen over the past few years, geopolitical consideration are something that feeds into your strategic decision making as an organization, something to consider, something to be conscious of and mindful when you make strategic decisions, when you make large investment decisions or programmatic decision that impacts the business for the next couple of years or 3 years or more.
A lot of complexities there to work through. Dinesh, I'm gonna skip off AI for a minute, and I'm gonna go to quantum, because I'm fascinated about post quantum readiness and awareness and all of those aspects. But from your perspective, you're in a company that is on the cutting edge of quantum development, so developing a quantum computer. We saw the US government gave IBM $1 billion in the last couple of weeks, and then I think 10 billion of an announcement from IBM itself that they're going to pour inward into developing quantum capabilities in this space. We look at the timelines. You have the consultant aspect to help businesses get ready, and I presume feel a responsibility to help that if you're one of the companies developing the capability could break today's cryptography. How do you treat this problem from your perspective out to the customer? What are the steps you go through with a customer to, one, help them realize there is an issue here that needs to be addressed, and two, help them mobilize to address that issue?
Yeah, great question. So I think one of the first thing is awareness. I think there's still a challenge where the nature of the threat or nature of the risk has not been clearly understood, right? So we start with the awareness and helping them understand what this means for their business, how exposed is their business is. So that would be our first step, that we help them understand and help them do it. And we do it at several layers. We start at the board level, and then we also go down and assess their environments and assess their setup, including their supply chain and everything else, and provide them a view of what are the key risks, long-term, strategic, as well as operational thing they need to consider. But once that's done, depending on how they are set up as a business, by that what we mean is like how much of third-party supply chain elements are set up and so on. We provide a specific recommendation that organizations need to, first of all, set up a programmatic team to drive this whole transformation. This is not a technology change. Let's just say a few years back, we had this log4j vulnerability, which is also something related to cryptography. Now, a lot of organizations basically leverage their existing BAU functions to actually resolve and remediate like they do any vulnerability sort of thing. Now, that's okay for one vulnerability or one issue that you found, whereas a PQC, you cannot operate or manage the way with your BAU teams, your operational teams. You got to set up a strategic, programmatic, centralized team that create awareness, develops capabilities, and advises the organization on not just current, but also future decisions and so on. So it also requires people with cryptography skill set. So one of the things we help them is, what kind of people you need to drive that program, because you need to understand the implications of, the different protocols and the algorithm, the vendor, engaging with vendors who supply technology for you to understand what their roadmap is on PQC. And at the same time, provide training and awareness and bring the literacy on PQC across the board. So it's a multitude of activities. It kind of gives a 360-degree coverage of all spheres of the business that the organization need to do it. But one of the things we also help them is this is a change across several things. This is not just a change on IT. It's a change to business, change to contracts, change to supply chain. So you need to make sure that you need to appreciate where you are as an organization. What are you doing today? What transformation programs you already have in flight? Let's look at them. Let's try and see if we can bring PQC into those programs. So these are change vehicles that are already in flight. Let's have a small uplift on those change vehicles and include PQC into those change vehicles so they are taken into consideration. Rather than spinning up a completely new program entirely, leverage those existing change vehicles. So it's a combination of several things that they need to do. But I think the most important thing is the programmatic approach is required because we, from our initial surveys and discussions and work we've done with our clients, this is typically a 5 to 6 years journey. It's not a small journey. It typically it takes a fair amount of time. And we all know now in the last 6 months, that's a lot of time where everything can change. Quite a lot of things can change. The way things are consumed, the way things are done. So that's one of the other reasons why you need to have a centralized team that constantly looks at how the landscape is changing, what are the new elements that comes into play, for example, AI. So there is an element of strategic program driven element that comes into the strategy part, but also there is a operational element. Also consider if you're buying new software, if you're refreshing your supply chain contracts, make sure that PQC is introduced into all of those contracts and areas and so on. So that is taken into consideration. So it's a sort of a complex multitude of program. In some cases, we are helping clients set up those centralized teams, which can drive some of these initiatives forward. So, that's a sort of a summary of how this whole thing is coming in and helping our clients' journey in this space.
That's a lovely 10,000 foot view, Dinesh, and it's bringing me to ask. So, I suppose bringing each one of those personas online is an entire piece of work in itself, from procurement to legal to finance, etc. That's a complex nested journey. When you walk into an organization, and you've done this numerous times now, what is the very first thing on your list to check off to go, we need to land this thing followed by this before we even go talk to those people, because they're going to look at us like we've got 2 heads or 3 heads and tell us they've got 5,000 other problems, go off somewhere else and I jimmy down the hall. What's your day one land, we need to get this done? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think one of the first things we've done, and this is something that we've learned. Initially, we used to let's look at their environment, scan their environment, build a C-bomb and look at inventory and so on. But that's just one part of it. But I think one of the first thing we look forward is, let's understand the level of exposure for this business from a top-down standpoint. So let's take a bank. If you're a bank, and I want to actually pick up a specific example, one of the banks were looking to migrate all their estate. They had a goal of 50% of their estate to one of the hyperscalers. And they had initiated the program. And then we were trying to understand, okay, tell us more about this program. What are you trying to achieve? They said in 5 to 6 years, once the migration is done to the cloud, all our revenue, all our customer touch point is going to be through this app that's running on the cloud. And that's essentially how we're going to transform our business. We're going to close a lot of branches in that we are running. We're going to entirely be digital. 70-80% of our customer touch point is going to be digital, and so on. So we said, okay, let's overlay the PQC timelines to this program, and let's understand what that means for this program and your business, right? So by the time they migrate to the client, they realize that they had to go back and address PQC. They would need to be taking down that application, doing a lot of change and a lot of testing. So there's going to be a massive disruption to their cloud application. So therefore, it'll have a direct impact to the revenue. So the way we frame that conversation on day one, on the first initial few days, is that we establish what is a strategic risk for this client. Now, it may not be for all clients. Now, there are different types of risk. Typically, cryptography gets put in the bucket of operational risk. It's an IT risk. It's a security risk. It impacts infrastructure, exposes data, and so on. But we think that it's not just an IT and operational risk. Yes, that is there. There is the harvest now, decrypt later element of it. But this is also a strategic risk. If you don't take into consideration the changes that you need to consider at a board level, it has a direct financial impact to your business in so many different ways. So we try to frame the conversation, frame the problem statement that way, and elevate the the operational risk element to a strategic risk, and that essentially mostly lands very well with the CXOs. They understand that language better rather than anything related to cryptography. I think cryptography is not necessarily a very favorite topic at the board level because they're not able to associate that with what does that mean for my business? What does that mean for what work I'm doing? So I think that's one of the things that we try to look for in the first few days and weeks in establishing that strategic risk, because then it becomes a far easier conversation, including the security leadership, to have with their senior leaders on why this program needs to be initiated, what does this mean, when it needs to be initiated, and what does it mean for their business, what's the exposure to their business.
I like that in terms of the way you're bringing it back to brass tacks, and you're kind of going, well, what we need to look at here is the value proposition, and then we need to look at the exposure elements, and we need to translate that into something that's tangible in terms of business English, so a board can understand it. So once you've done that exercise, which I'm assuming is not a in and done on day one, it's a couple of weeks or months of understanding the footprint, understanding the direction across the different transformation projects and across the business strategies and all of that, and tying it together. Then you've got buy-in from your executive layer, but then you need to go down a layer below, which is your execution layer, and your procurement teams, your legal teams, your architecture teams, your engineering teams, your delivery teams. Do you have a different methodology or approach to translate the business ambition to the effort that needs to happen now, that you can break it down into roadmaps for execution? How do you go about that piece?
So I think great question, by the way. So our recommendation to do the COE part, we call it Center of Excellence, is to have a centralized team that looks at all these aspects and actually provides very prescriptive recommendations of what that needs to be done. What PQC requires is not a change in these fundamental functions entirely, but rather a consideration of post-quantum cryptography in those specific areas. For example, and if it's relevant, right? So for example, there is an existing procurement function and they are doing what they're doing. They have a very well-defined process. They have a way to, evaluate vendors, consider vendors, and then buy them or approve them for the organization to consume. Now, within that, all we need to work with them is to make sure that post-quantum cryptography is a key factor in the decision-making process. So we take those different functions and bring the PQC element of what that is and why it needs to be done into each one of those functions and actually make sure that they take that into consideration. Of course, this requires a overall buy-in, and that's one of the reasons I was talking about that the sooner the quicker you establish that this is a strategic risk for your business, the better it is that you get the sponsorship to be able to go into each one of these functions, work with them to make sure they take that into consideration. But you also there are various ways of expressing this information. One of the things I was talking about is the business impact element of it. The other thing is to say the amount of technical debt you're going to keep adding, it's going to become very cost prohibitive for your business. It's going to be costing you so much to implement and verify. So there is a window of opportunity available. where you could make sure with the right influence and functions, you will be able to manage these change cost, operational costs to a desired acceptable levels. If not, it will become unmanageable. And that is one of the levers to share. And you can't just say it. You got to go back to them with some data to show them, and then you immediately get a lot of buy-in to do it. So coming back to this, so we go into those specific functions. We have already got that idea, and we have, within IBM, we built some specific assets to help drive that conversation. But at the same time, you will have to make these stakeholders aware of the topic itself, which means you got to give them education and training so they can ask informed questions, and be part of the informed evaluation. It's no good for the central team to be able to do each one of the functions. It rather empower these different teams that are in the BAU operations to be able to understand PQC implications, but also ask the right question and drive the right outcomes for the organization.
And on that, so we've kind of gone through the two phases. Now you're into execution. When it comes to execution, what are the key kind of enablers that a business may not be thinking about that really kind of slow down or speed up how quickly they can move in that space? And what I mean by that, you touched on awareness and training there a minute ago. What about test capacity? The understanding the data types and the exposure length of that data, etc. Is there certain key kind of enablers that you need to put on the table and go, this is how we size where we start, and this is what identifies how quick we can go or how slow we're going to be in this process?
Some of it is down to we as I said earlier, I think we have the BAU operation functions that operate today, but at the same time, you also have these strategic programs that are already in flight or about to kick off and do it. I think the fastest way to make some of the change transformation required on a PQC is to take advantage of these digital modernization programs and so on. So that will drive. You already have a funded program. You already mobilize people. You already set up the infrastructure. With a certain level of uplift, you're also taking into consideration PQC. That's one part of it. So it's evaluating what's the book of work that the organization's already signed up to delivering, and taking advantage of in bringing the PQC topic into that. But the other parts are also in relation to what the capacity of capabilities they have. In some cases, some organization are mature that they have a reasonably good cryptography capabilities in terms of tooling, infrastructure, and people, and they can take advantage of it. The highly regulated industries have this capability, but that's also good for what they know and what they can do. It can't take an PQC on its own and drive that. But in most of the industries, they definitely need a lot of help, and they need teams to come in, extended teams to come in and help them. But also in some cases, they have to invest in new tooling and capabilities to be able to drive that forward. I think it's fair to say that some of the existing IT and security landscape, the tooling in the landscape will help to a certain extent. So you can take advantage of what they have, but there are gaps in the current landscape where they do need to invest in some of these capabilities, because this is not just a one-off. PQC is going to be an ongoing topic. It's going to be one of the other things that the security team and the IT teams have to do it continuously on an ongoing basis, which means they need that capability as a BAU function for them to continue to demonstrate that they are addressing this threat on an ongoing basis.
I think I have your three stages clear in my head now, Dinesh. I have the find the value proposition for the board, translate that value into the execution layer, and then become the government and make your in-flight programs pay the quantum tax, so that they're installing or they're configuring or meeting the standards of expectation in terms of being quantum ready. And that's a great way of bringing it all together. Dinesh, look, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I think the listeners will get a lot of value out of this conversation, and I'm looking forward to having you back in a few years and you can tell me all of the horror stories of where it went wrong.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Francis, and thanks for the great question. I was very happy to be part of the podcast. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.